Hello, welcome to Renting Ready. I'm Kevin Critchley, a Renting Ready tutor at Crisis Skylight, South Yorkshire. What we'll be looking at today is part of Unit 1, Understanding Tenancies. What we're going to look at is landlord and tenant responsibilities as part of a tenancy. Bear in mind that what we're learning today focuses on renting from a private landlord, although most of it also applies to social renting, such as councils and housing associations. People on a licence, however, have very few of the rights in this section. That is people who live with family, with friends, if they've got a live-in landlord, if they're in hostels and a lot of supported housing. Please check your rights if you're not sure. Hopefully, getting the keys to your new home is the start of a beautiful relationship between yourself and the landlord. Many tenancies go well, so long as each knows what they have to do. To help to prevent problems and to identify when things are going wrong, it's important to know what the expectations and responsibilities are around a tenancy. The first place to look for responsibilities for both the landlord and the tenant is the tenancy agreement. This is a legally binding contract. However, it is important to realise that there are things that a landlord always has a responsibility for, things that are not optional but are actually set in law, so must be followed. The tenancy agreement cannot take these rights away from the tenant, and these rights apply even if the tenancy agreement doesn't mention them. Now, let's have a look at some responsibilities and consider whether they are something that a landlord or a tenant has to do. First, who has responsibility for maintaining and repairing gas and electricity so that it is safe in the property? It is the landlord. For gas, there is a piece of law that says landlords must, every 12 months, have a registered gas engineer check gas appliances and issue a safety certificate. Tenants have to get a copy at the start of the tenancy. Any problems with the electrics, such as broken sockets or faulty wiring, the landlord has to fix. And there is a new piece of law that means in future, landlords will have to get an electrical safety test done as well every 5 years. Next, who has responsibility for making sure that the rent gets paid and that it's paid on time? It's the tenant. The tenant's responsible for making sure that the rent is paid in full and on time. If the tenant is claiming benefits to help pay the rent, it's the tenant's responsibility to make sure that the claim is in place and it's in order. Always open and respond to official letters, such as to do with benefits, and get help if you need to. But if you have problems with paying the rent, it's important to get help and to speak to your landlord. So who's responsible for visitors to the property, such as family and friends? It's the tenant that's responsible for the behaviour of their guests at the property. It just doesn't cut it for the tenant to say, it wasn't me, it was them. It is the tenant that faces eviction, so it's the tenant that has to make sure that the guests act appropriately. So who's responsible for fixing a leaking water pipe at the property? That's the landlord. There's a piece of law that says that landlords are responsible for repairing the supply of water and for sanitation. So this includes the toilet and the bath and all the pipework. However, tenants have to contact the landlord. Landlords are not generally at fault if they were not told that there's a problem, unless they really should have known. Tenants should let the landlord know of any repairs that need doing, preferably by email or by letter, so that there's some evidence that the landlord has been told. Next, who's responsible for allowing entry to the property so that inspections or repairs can be carried out? Tenants should allow landlords or their workers to enter the property to inspect it, to do repairs, or to carry out gas safety checks. However, the landlord has to have given at least 24 hours notice, and they must want to come at a reasonable time. The landlord should never let themselves in without the tenant's permission, unless there's an emergency such as a fire. Next, who's responsible for fixing a broken window? The law says a landlord has to fix the structure of the house, such as the walls, the windows, the doors, and also the boiler. However, the tenant is responsible if they cause the damage or it's caused by their visitors. So who's responsible for keeping to the terms of the tenancy agreement? It's a bit of a trick question. Both the landlord and the tenant have to keep to the agreement because it's a contract between them. Remember though, that if the tenancy has any terms that try to reduce the tenant's legal rights, then these can't be enforced. For example, a term in the tenancies that says that the tenant has to fix the boiler can't be enforced because the law says that the landlord always is responsible for this. Let's quickly look at other tenancy issues, again deciding whether they are a landlord or a tenant responsibility. Just spend a few seconds thinking about each one, then we'll reveal the answers. So you can see that there are a lot of issues at play when there's a tenancy. A lot of the responsibilities that a tenant has shouldn't be a big surprise to you, as they're mostly based on common sense. Meaning that tenants are expected to behave as any reasonable person would. Putting the bins out, keeping the place clean, letting the landlord know when there's something that needs repairing, paying the rent and so on. Landlords, though, are much more controlled by what is set down in law, and these laws exist to make sure that tenants have somewhere that is decent and safe to live. If a landlord isn't doing what they're supposed to do, then a tenant can take action. Seeking advice from a specialist agency, such as Citizens Advice or Shelter, can be a good way of exploring what your rights and options are. They may even have workers that can help you in dealing with the landlord. The council has workers that can come and inspect a property and decide if the landlord is failing to keep the property fit for you to live in. They can issue a notice to the landlord requiring them to bring it up to standard. You can see a solicitor even. Some solicitors will give you a free consultation to advise if you have a good case, and they may be able to take action to get the landlord to pay compensation. However, if a tenant is not doing what they should, the landlord may want to get them out and serve them with a notice, either because of the law, for example not paying rent, antisocial behaviour, or for breaking the tenancy agreement in some other way. If ever you get a notice, you should seek help. At the end of the tenancy, landlords can ask the deposit protection scheme for some of the deposit, and it's up to the scheme to decide whether the landlord should get the money. If a deposit doesn't cover all the money owed to the landlord, either as rent or because of the cost of repairing damages, then the landlord can apply for a money order at court. If this is granted, then it goes down as a CCJ, which seriously affects a person's credit rating and can mean that other landlords won't want to rent to them in the future. Now, press pause to complete the Tenancy Rights and Responsibilities worksheet, which will test your learning on this topic. When you've finished, press play again. To recap, we've looked at what a tenant's responsibilities are when they rent a property. Failing to keep to their responsibilities could end up in eviction. We've looked at landlord responsibilities. If they fail to do what they should, they could face legal action against them. We can't possibly cover everything here, and there'll be many different situations that a tenant may face, so you may want to get more information on the subject. Here are a few suggestions of where relevant information can be found. You can also speak to your crisis worker if you'd like to. Thank you for watching, and we hope you found it useful. Renting Ready videos are available on other aspects of renting.